Okay, everyone. So tonight I will be giving kind of a brief overview of project management, and then, as Michaela said, hand it off to Mary from Amcor. So let's see. Okay. Before defining project management, we're going to define what a project is to kind of understand why project management is important. So a project is work that has a specific deliverable and it needs to be completed in a specific timeline to end at your goal, which is usually a product or service. So with this kind of description, we kind of understand now the necessity of having like a specific framework to end up at your end goal. So now we can define project management, which, as from the slide we can see, is a practice of applying specific tools, processes, and methodologies to effectively and efficiently bring a project to a successful conclusion. And the aim is to intelligently like make use of your team and resources to complete a project. And it usually has a specified like time, costs, and scope, which are which are cornerstones of project management. So the 3 points which we see in the triangle to the right are constantly affecting each other, and these can be controlled. Like, for example, time, you can have schedule management by creating like a Gantt chart. Cost, you can create a budget that estimates like resource costs, and you need to approve this before before you start your project. And then also scope management, which early in the project you need to make sure you define what your goals are and like what you want as your end result. So okay, let's see. Okay, wait, did I skip one? Yep, no, we're good. So throughout a project, as I kind of previously described, there's many factors that need to be considered. And this kind of leads into responsibilities for a project manager and what their role is throughout projects. So Michaela kind of went more in depth on these last semester. So if you want to watch that video, it's up on YouTube. But we'll start with scope management. So you need to define the work needed to complete the project. That's one of the first like early tasks to start with. And then task management is like planning tasks and defining deliverables. And then we have resource management, which is making sure that you're efficiently using like people and like materials and all your resources. And then we have team management, which is making sure that you're effectively leading a team. Schedule management, which it consists of like creating project schedule, and then also constantly like monitoring any changes that could affect your schedule and project status. And then we have quality management, which you want to make sure that throughout your project you have like a quality policy and implement some sort of like quality assurance. And for cost management, we have like estimating costs, creating budget, and then stakeholder management is always making sure to satisfy your stakeholders' expectations and communicate with them throughout a project lifecycle. And then risk management, this is a topic I discussed last semester in one of our meetings, also up on YouTube. But this involves like identifying and monitoring any risks and trying to minimize them as much as possible. And then you have status reporting, which is like monitoring also and kind of tracking projects through like documentation or reports. So now we will discuss like the project lifecycle, which the tasks that or the work of our our manager can be directly applied to this. So it starts with initiating project and proving that it is feasible and can be executed within a reasonable time and like budget. And usually you want to create like a business case and kind of justify like the need for the project and like develop goals for like the end result of it. And the second phase, you have like planning your project, which includes, as I've already said, costs, like risks, resources, and like your timeline for your project. Which again, as I've already said, like a Gantt chart is a very effective tool, especially for like scheduling things. But and in the planning phase, you also want to create a like specific project scope, which can be completed through like a work breakdown structure, which lays out your like deliverables and any project activities. And then in the execution stage, this is where most of the work happens and the project activities become completed. And you also are kind of dealing with any risks and changes that could affect like the scheduling of your project. So for monitoring and controlling, you want to make sure that you're staying on schedule. So that kind of ties into like execution to make sure that you're constantly like keeping track of your project and any changes that occur. And then finally, we have project closure, which involves like presenting any final deliverables and also making sure that you can have a smooth transition to the next team. So you want to make sure that your like handoff is as easy as possible and like straightforward for the next team, whoever works on what you came up with. So it's also important in this process to like reflect on how the project went and like address any mistakes that could have like occurred. Um, so here's kind of a brief overview of different management methodologies. We'll go more into detail next meeting, but this is also an important like component of like project management. So here's some of the most popular ones. There's waterfall, which it's more like requirement focused and you complete each project stage before like going on to the next. So I'd say an example would be like a subscription-based software like Microsoft Office when like a new version is rolled out every year. That's kind of like the requirement they focus on. And then we have Agile, which it's more flexible than Waterfall because you're actually like adapting to any changes and making sure that yeah, so like you're more like prone to like adapting to changes, which Waterfall really doesn't do that as much. It's also heavily used in like software development. Most of these are that's like probably a good example for from an engineering standpoint. But then we have Scrum, which is also like a part of Agile, and it focuses more on like daily stand-ups and like sprints, which are like short like time frames for like work and trying to like meet a deadline within like a week or something of like a specific task. Also heavily used in software development. And then like there's also Prince 2, which is used by like the government. Like a good example is it's used by the government in the UK actually. And yeah, as it says here, it's dividing projects into like multiple stages. And then we have Lean, which it's a way to cut waste and kind of optimize like any technologies or like processes. It's heavily used in manufacturing. So for example, trying to cut like material waste, like reducing that. So why is project management important? Well, from these diagrams here, we can see that if those principles would have been like added to your project, it would have minimized any like the downfalls of it. So project management is has a lot of like behind the scenes work, And even without having like a direct project manager, many of these tasks really still need to be handled to have a successful like project outcome. And some overall benefits, I would say, are making sure that like for especially having like one dedicated project manager is making sure your team efficiency, you're working as efficient as possible with your team and ensuring that everything's running smoothly. Also like being able to have more like flexibility, and then also every person in your team is having like a designated task, which kind of increases like the quality of the work. And then also there's better planning overall. But yeah, are there any questions before I hand it off to Mary? Okay, if not, Mary, you can introduce yourself.
Hey everyone. I have some slides. If you don't mind, I can share those.
Okay, yeah, for sure.
Right.
Let me stop sharing.
Yep. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, I work at Amcor. So, you see my slides?
Yep.
All right. So I was asked to talk today with just an overview on project management as I interact with it. So I'm going to do a little bit about me, a little bit on the purpose of project management, and then sort of run through some of the tools and ways that it impacts my workflow. You guys, I think, are going to do a deeper dive later. I just wanted to use these tools because anyone who gets too deep into project management knows it's all about the tools. So I want to just use some of that to inform what I want to talk about. So me, I have a master's degree in physics. I got my BS at Bonaventure and then my master's at Kansas State. I started into Amcor directly after graduation in 2015. So this is my 6th year with the company. I'm in R&D. I'm a scientist on the innovation team in the material science group. Amcor is a company. It's a global company, very global. I think on every continent except for Africa. Might be Africa too now that we, from some recent acquisitions. Anyway, I included a handy infographic that my company provides, just an overview of the company. For my experience with project management specifically, other than just the obvious day-to-day, I manage projects and programs every single day to collect data, test containers, that sort of thing. Training-wise, I've completed PMO, which is Project Management Organization training at my company, and then I did the Lean Six Sigma Black Belt training, which is an official training program that I did through my company. So the purpose of project management, we just saw a good deep dive into some of the different ways of doing project management. If you ask anyone in industry, the point is to get projects done on time. That is the goal. So the 3 main things that I want to talk about today that are main components of that are the communication, maintaining timelines, and then highlighting challenges. So you want your communication to be efficient and relevant. You want people to pay attention and get something out of it. Nothing gets done if you're not communicating. And then the timeline is the thing your boss cares about. That is just, when will we start seeing money from this project? And then the challenges are, you don't want to be fighting fires. You don't want something to come up that you didn't expect. So you want to know ahead of time what's going to cause a problem and try and mitigate the risk. So for communications, some of the keys to effective communication are to know your audience. You want to know if you're technical or high level, because you want to tailor your communications accordingly. Your upper management, does not care about the same things that the plant team cares about. So if you're talking about the same thing with both groups, you're just going to get blank stares. You have to make sure you're communicating with the right tools. Some people want slides, other people just want to talk in the hall. So you have to make sure that you are tailoring your conversation to what they need. And then you have to be flexible. You want these people to help you. Sometimes it's not always everybody's job to help you. You have to convince them to help you. You have to make it easy for them to do that. Behind the scenes, you might have some really solid, rigid organization tools, but nobody wants to see that. So it's one of those hide your work sort of situations where you want to just make everything run smoothly. And if people aren't going to be receptive to your organization tools, don't show it to them, just show them what they need to know. And then also never assume an audience remembers your project. Even if you spoke with this person about it at your last meeting 2 weeks ago, they've probably forgotten it because they've got their own stuff to do. So you always have to refresh people on the project before you get started. So one of the tools I want to talk about for communication is the communication plan. It is very simple, but very helpful. And the point for this tool is that you really want to be able to understand what each of your team members is going to respond best to when it comes to communication. So you want to ask them, how do you want to be communicated to? Some people want to have face-to-face. Some people want to have a text message. Some people want email. Some people like to be called on the phone. So you have to figure out what each team member likes to communicate with, and then at what cadence you need to communicate with them. I, for example, have to have a business sponsor for most of my projects. I only talk to my business sponsor every 2 months-ish, whereas my manager, we have weekly meetings. So you have to really understand what cadence is going to help your team member work best with your project. And another thing that really helps with communication is having a dashboard. Keep it simple, keep it visual. The example I have here is very simple. My company has pretty ones with logos and everything. I wanted this so that you could actually use it. Ours are proprietary. But so if you're working in a company, MSU might have it too, I don't know. They'll have these kinds of tools pre-made. But you want to have a dashboard where you have all of the basic information that everybody needs to know about your project right there. So at the beginning of a meeting, you can flash this on the screen, highlight the important things that are relevant to your meeting. But if you include it in your slide deck and you send out your slide deck before the meeting, everyone will be able to refresh and they'll know what your project is about going into the meeting. The thing that most bosses would say is most important about project management is maintaining timelines. And this is what provides the structure for when you're going to communicate. You're going to want to use the timelines to help govern the cadence that you choose for discussion with your team members. Also helps set expectations, especially with upper management. They're always going to want your project done tomorrow, and having a timeline that's well thought out and can account for each step of the progress or each step along the way is going to help explain to upper management why you can't make this tomorrow and why it's going to take a few months. So was mentioned earlier too, Gantt charts, one of project management's favorite toys. And it allows you to really see how each task is going to impact your timeline. This is usually not something you share with the full team. This is another one that sort of is a hide your work sort of thing. Some team members are going to want to be able to see some part of the Gantt chart, but most of the time, if you sit down in a meeting and you pull this up, everyone just glazes over. Nobody wants to see this. They want to know when, say, the design stage is going to be done. They don't want to know the details of each stage. Unless they're part of the design team, then you'll pull that part out and look at that specifically. But the design team does not care about the testing schedule. So something like a Gantt chart is for your person who's at the project management level, who has to keep all of the balls in the air to know what's going on. There's tons of specialized software. I Googled Gantt charts before while I was making this to make sure I had the definitions all right. And I have had YouTube ads for some Gantt chart software for like 3 days now since Googling it. So this is one of those things that there's plenty of software out there, but like I threw this together in Excel in like 5 minutes just for this example. The other thing that can really help you with keeping your timelines and organizing responsibilities straight is a RACI chart. This is another darling of project management, and this is where you assign different team members roles and responsibilities. So you have activities and deliverables down the left side, and then across the top you have people's names. In this case, I just put roles as placeholders, and then you decide who is responsible, who is accountable, who is to be consulted, and who is to be informed for each task down the list. And this is another one nobody wants to see. Nobody wants to see the word responsible next to their name. So usually you can get by with keeping this in the background and just knowing for yourself who you need to hold accountable and responsible for each step in the process. But yeah, most people don't want to see a big red R next to their name, even if they are responsible, even if it is the job written in their job description. They don't want that. So you want to make sure that you're softening the blow a little bit when you're including people, especially if it's not in their job description. So then the last thing I wanted to touch on was highlighting challenges. And this is the part that is very important, but also somewhat difficult to do. You want to know what's going to go wrong before it goes wrong, so that you know what to do in the event that it does happen and how to try to make sure it doesn't happen. And it also helps with keeping everything aligned. Like I said before, your management wants it done as soon as possible. They're going to push for tight deadlines. And the way that you can sort of make sure you're covered a little bit is you can say, we can do as tight of a deadline as you want, but these risks are going to be elevated because of that. So this is a tool that sort of gives a little bit of breathing room in project management. So risk assessment is where you just highlight the risks, the mitigations, likelihood of it happening, and then the severity of what goes wrong if it does happen. And then I included a little chart here that's like, if it's green, if it's not, like, if this does go wrong, it's not going to kill the project. And then red is likely to absolutely destroy the project if it happens. And so that way, if you have someone pressuring you to tighten your timelines, you can say, all right, fine, we tighten the timelines, but that's going to push this risk from yellow into red. Are you all right with that? And then when they say yes or no, then that gives you permission to either take that risk or slow down your timelines. And then stakeholder analysis is the other side of risk are your team members. Some people are required to be a part of a project, but might not fully support it. And like I mentioned before, it's not everybody's job to support you. So you have to convince them to support you. And the stakeholder analysis is something you do for yourself. You never, ever, ever, ever show it to stakeholders. It's where you write down everyone's name, understand, are they supportive? If they're not, how supportive do they need to be? And then what can I do to gain their support? What aspect of this project do I need to highlight? If I have a tech in a plant who's really unsupportive of it, how is the completion of this project going to positively benefit their work experience? And nobody wants to know what you think about how supportive they are or what you're going to do to get their support. The only person you might share it with is a direct manager, someone who is really going to be able to help you move someone from from not supporting to supporting. Yeah, you don't want anyone to show this to anyone. This is a behind the scenes sort of document. So yeah, the tips I have outside of those is practice. Project management doesn't just work for work or school. You can use the techniques in all kinds of hobbies and stuff like that. It gives you a chance to try some tools outside of the stress of trying to actually get a project done. When in doubt, communicate. If you see something coming up, if there's a risk you didn't catch or something, you need to communicate fast because freezing up is just going to destroy timelines. And the sooner you can tell someone something's going wrong, the sooner it can get fixed or timelines can get adjusted. Also, try different tools. Like I said, there are a million project management tools. Just preparing for this, I happened to open my company's project management tool folder, and it was just a lot. There were a lot of tools there that you could use. So try them out. Some things will work, some things won't. Gantt charts are really popular. Everyone loves them, but like some people don't. So if you try it and it doesn't work, try something else. Keep it as simple as possible. You have to keep track of all of this. You don't want to have 20 different documents that are saying the same thing. So find a concise tool set that helps you keep your projects on track. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Has anything ever like drastically gone wrong in your team? And like, what did you have to do to like change that or like mitigate that?
Well, so you may have heard of a little thing called COVID. That
That's good.
dramatically changed everything. Like I said, this is a global company. So my team had a project running in Germany, and I wasn't the engineer on site. The engineer on site happened to be in the States when Germany said no more visitors from the US. So we had to do a lot of work. Typically, we don't do a lot of remote work. If you're working on a machine, people like to be there. They like to be able to feel the product coming off the line, run tests if they have to. So we did a lot of work understanding how to work remotely, how to use a lot of different tools to make that work. So in that case, the mitigation was technology, upgrading our technology systems. Anything else?
I did have a question for the like stakeholder thing you were trying to explain for like influence. Is that for
Yeah.
just members on your team, or is that just like the people you're presenting your projects to?
Yeah, so stakeholders is a broader term usually than team. So stakeholders will incorporate people like sponsors, even people who might not be associated with the project that you think should be. So if you're working in one department and you think this would really be useful for this other department also, and there's a key management person on that other team, you might include them as a stakeholder under a category of not interested, and then you might be interested in like making them interested. So you might want to do a presentation to that person that shows them how, yes, this work I'm doing for one team is primarily for them, but it would also help you. Would you like to contribute resources to also help it get through?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody else have any questions for Mary?
The only other thing I could probably think of is I think it was during like Julia's presentation for like those like risk strategies. Like, how are you trying to transfer this? Like, you apply like these knowledge and steps into like a resume, like written down, like trying to explain to employers that you are like competent in leading a team And, like how you let the team through like these messages you provided. How do you explain it to employers that you're quality?
Mhm. Yeah, so Julia might have some techniques also from the company standpoint. There are a few things you can do. There are programs like Lean Six Sigma that will give you certifications in project management. Those are recognized pretty broadly. The reception is somewhat mixed. The other way that it really shows up is less on the resume and more in the interview when you're asked questions like some of the questions we've had here. They'll ask you just what would you do if a risk came up, and then you have to explain it, and then you can incorporate some of the tools that you've used and then some of the things you've learned about project management flow.
Yeah, I'd also say like definitely in an interview, kind of stressing how you led your team, like that you communicated a lot, or like any mistake or problems that kind of came up and how you solved that, like with your team. Just like personal examples like that, I would say.
Thanks.
If there's no other questions for Mary or for Julia today, I want to thank everyone for their time. And Mary, thank you for coming to present to us. If you have any questions, you're welcome to stay around a little bit at the end. But other than that, you guys are free to go. The only other thing I could say